But I don't know if you heard back from, whoops. So good afternoon, House Transportation on Wednesday, February 18th. We took quite a bit of testimony this morning on local options tax and down in our joint session. So we have this section to sort of follow up on that. Here's some other perspectives from the tax department and from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I don't know if you want to flip a coin to who goes first. This conversation is kind of based on what we had this morning, but I know there's another, which also was brought up this morning, the whole discussion about Representative Burke's bill that Brattleboro asked her to put in related to the fuel that might leak onto that. But today we're kind of picking up from where we left off this morning, since they had gone through it twice and that was our first purview of it. So whomever would like to come up and join us in the witness stand first is entirely, you guys want to flip it forward? Flip for it.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. I know we spoke on the phone, but all of a sudden here you are in person.
I know, you invited me up and here I am. Okay. For the record, my name is Rebecca Samaroff. I'm the Deputy Commissioner at the Vermont Department of Taxes. And I thought I could just do a little local option tax 101, unless that feels really.
We got a little bit of a 101
Okay.
this morning, but
Okay,
I
great.
suspect in case we missed it and you want to go through it fairly quickly, there's a good chance for.
Well, I don't have anything
Confirmation questions.
great
And-
formally prepared, so
That's okay.
yeah, you could also lead me where your curiosity is too. I did have my colleague Sarah sent the committee just a document that we had put together for Senate Transportation yesterday. Who they were curious about who's reached out to us about upcoming local option tax votes for town meeting day. So I think that's sitting with either the assistant or is maybe posted online.
It is posted,
Okay.
there's two municipalities voting on local option taxes, and then towns voting on local option taxes, so we have two there.
Yeah, I think the distinction here was there was a group of towns that have indicated to us that they are like for sure going to put this on their ballots for town meeting day. We have 10 of those. And then we also had folks reaching out because they're considering putting it on a ballot. And then we just get regular data requests, which sometimes turn in, or sometimes it's like a town official who's just curious because they're, making a case. Sometimes it's like a real move to get it on the ballot, not quite sure how to weigh those. We don't dig into those so much.
Do
But
we have the ability to put it up as far as the list goes, or the presentation you gave to the Senate yesterday? I'm not sure if that's possible.
yeah, I don't,
Not a plug.
yeah, I don't
Share
know.
screen thing, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think there's not like much to discuss there. It's a resource you guys have handy. And I talk about local option tax a lot, so I just was gonna rattle off kind of like the overview and so I can totally do that, but I don't want to look bore folks if you had it already this
I have
far.
a question based on one of the things you said already, which is the data that is available to a town or not that they're asking for in terms of how much sales tax they pay by zip code. Is that available in terms of what you collect from sales tax reports and whatnot? What
Yeah, really good
information is
question.
available to a town?
Yeah, that is a great question. There's a little bit of nuance there. So for like brick and mortar establishments in a town, like stores that are just there within a town boundary, we can and do report monthly sales stats for all Vermont municipalities. And that's really what's reflected there. It's like the stores that are in your jurisdiction. In this modern world, a lot of sales activity is happening online as well. So a nuance there is that e-commerce vendors like, big online platforms or any online platforms who make sales across towns in Vermont, they file one sales tax return with us every month. And that's like their aggregated sales from across the state. So we don't have granular data from those filers as to where to geolocate those sales. So, when you look at our sales and use tax statistics or our meals and rooms tax statistics online, those are nicely broken out by town and by county, but there's kind of like a big missing slice there, which is, e-commerce for the sales tax. For meals and rooms tax, it's like the big short-term rental platforms. It's the same dynamic. They file one return with the tax department for all their activity across the state.
Go ahead, Representative Powell.
So does that imply that people who are buying online, you're getting the 6% sales tax?
Absolutely.
Appropriate. But if there's a local option tax for sales in that town that I happen to live in, it's not getting collected because you don't know it actually came from that town.
No, we do. We
Oh.
fully collect the 1% from all those folks, and that is so like in our these are great questions, and they're exactly in the right order, but I should have anticipated this one. So for all municipalities, we have those like monthly sales, meals, and rooms stats available online. If you have a local option, if your town already has a local option tax, then sales into your town are broken out on the return. So, we absolutely see those sales. We make sure, the taxpayer is correctly collecting and remitting a 1% where appropriate in the towns that have a local option tax. And we can tell, and towns actually get with the quarterly disbursement report, how many sales, what was their sales, what was the revenue generated, what's their local option tax. So we can geolocate the destination of deliveries from e-commerce platforms to towns that have a local option tax. Everyone else, is just included in that big aggregate bucket.
So it doesn't matter really where you buy it from. So I could buy it from my town, Hinesboro. If I shipped it to I think Montpelier has a local tax, maybe they do or not. If I shipped it here, they're the ones that will get that 1%.
Right, yeah, so it's a sales tax as well as, meals tax and rooms tax are called destination based. So it's all about where you, the consumer, take possession of the item. So, whether that's at your PO box or at your home address, that is like the sales tax jurisdiction that the, company is being held to when they make a delivery.
And so just to follow up, so Amazon, when they sell something to Vermont, they know, oh, it's, Timbuktu, Vermont. I gotta add 6% sales tax, and then they charge that. But if it's Shelburne, which has the local option tax, they know, okay, Shelburne, I now have to add the additional 1%.
Right,
Because
yeah,
it's Shelburne. So
yeah.
that information is shared with,
For this, what
Yeah.
just happened.
so that information is shared with all these vendors.
Right, yeah, and maybe I'll just do a little deep dive, shallow dive on just our kind of administrative practice when a new town comes online, because I think that's kind of helpful. So, we, town meeting days when most of these local option tax votes happen. So we'll get, a string of emails in the hours and days following saying, we're in, we're doing it, and then we require a 90-day period to, just get our administrative side in order before that can become effective. So 90 days, and then the first 90 days after a town alerts us that they have enacted a local option tax, we can, bring it online in the first quarter after that 90 days. So that's often July 1st for town meeting day votes. And in that period of time, we make sure our integrated tax system, our tech stack is all, resorted to be accommodating the new local option tax. We also update this publicly available rate and boundary file, which is a file that, the e-commerce companies, or more often a third party, service that does this for you and plugs into your shopping cart. If you're an e-commerce vendor, they will scrape those files and use that information to determine the taxability. And that's so we have that big rate and boundaries file. We also host a tool supported by the Vermont Center for Geographic Information, which is really excellent group of mapping nerds here at the state. There's exceptional to work with. They built us this awesome tool on our website, local option tax rate finder, where you can plug in an address or a PO box, and they'll tell you which jurisdiction that address falls in and what local option taxes are in play there. So all that gets updated. Then we send correspondences to every business in the new local option tax municipality to make sure they know about what's about to come online and what their responsibilities are, and they're all set up and understand their filing requirements. We send similar correspondence to all the businesses in a neighboring jurisdiction to let them know about their neighbor's new local option tax, because when it comes to deliveries, which can happen in food service too, with pizzas or florists or anything, brick and mortar stores often are doing deliveries as well. Important to know that a new local option tax is coming on nearby. And then we also send correspondences to all of our, sales taxpayers that generally pay tax in more than one Vermont municipality. That's kind of like a proxy for what we think of as like the e-commerce vendors. If we see that you regularly have sales and across like all of our towns, then, we think it's pretty likely that you'll be impacted by a new local option tax coming online too. So we make sure that they have that information as well. So yeah, that's all stuff that's happening in that 90 days. And that's how like the vendors, get a flag from us at least. But I think, we do our proactive flagging, and I think they are also being very proactive because they're, Vermont's not unique in having local option taxes. So they have, they're either a third party business tracking this for them, or, host their own, kind of local sales tax awareness team internally.
What's the audit process like for these filers? I don't know how many sales tax filers you have in the state.
That's a really great question. I actually don't know that either. But I could find that quickly, but I've become pretty bad at multitasking since having 2-year-old twins a couple of years ago. That part of my brain just stopped. So I will not venture to do that, but I can follow up with the committee afterwards with some accumulated
Well, it's in the
questions.
thousands.
Yeah, there's less. Yeah.
Is there some kind of audit process that reviews the local option taxes to see if
Yeah.
they're filed correctly or that they're going to the right places?
Yeah.
What kind of audit system you have in your?
Totally. So because, as I think the committee is probably aware, like local option tax is tagged on to, like one of our like main state tax types. So, certainly in the normal course of sales and use tax audits or meals and rooms tax audits, the local option tax piece of those returns is reviewed as well. But, once a new local option tax comes online, we spend a lot of attention on that town or towns in the first few months. And a lot of that is like we have like automated programs that look for, like making sure we're seeing that town light up on returns that often pay local option tax across many towns. So like some of those like presumed e-commerce returns. And then we also get a lot of, manual kind of like one-on-one feedback during those months too, because it's just like unavoidably messy when, and it's like basically having a new tax type emerge, in that community. So we get, myriad, pings from either businesses who are, concerned with a consumer's complaint or consumer saying, hey, I got charged this 1%. I don't think that was right. Sometimes we're dealing with brick and mortar stores who have, or national chains and have like a headquarters in Denver or something. So it's like, that headquarters POS system might not understand the nuance between Berry City and Berry Town, I can go on a deep dive here, but I'll just do a little aside for now, unless folks are curious. But the like USPS system really does not set Vermont up for success here. We have many, many towns that like coexist within 5-digit zip codes, and for better or worse, USPS like kind of assigns a town name to a 5-digit zip code. So, I have some visuals that are pretty striking where you can see like all the zip codes that are identified as Montpelier, and they spread to East Montpelier, to Middlesex, to Worcester. It's like a real, interesting spread of all Montpelier. And then meanwhile, Berry City and Berry Town are just called Berry for USPS. So, something that you think should be pretty definitive in understanding where you are in space, like looking at an envelope or just like your postal address, is not really helpful in this case. So we get a lot of noise in the first couple months, and our taxpayer services business team is, just routinely calling businesses, calling company headquarters, to make sure everyone's getting it all fine tuned, and pointing to our tools for folks that don't know about them.
Another question, something I learned this year, but maybe it's not news to everybody. If I have a public electric vehicle charger and I'm selling electricity to somebody, there's a 6% sales tax on that. It's news to me. And then therefore, if there's a local option, that it should be 7%, could be 7%.
Right. Yeah, sales tax on electricity doesn't like strike everyone right away because residential electricity is exempt. So we don't really, feel it in our day to day. But yeah, absolutely.
Representative Tom?
So it was helpful to understand some of the admin and communications and taxpayer support elements for bringing a new law online. Do you imagine it'd be a similar workload or any less if it was upping from 1% to 2% as one of the proposals has suggested?
Yeah, really great question. And we've like just started, understandably, kicking the tires on this internally at the tax department. And I do think the workload would look really similar, bringing a town that currently has a 1%, like up to a 2%. Just like a lot of the same processes have to happen, like both the communication side for sure, and doing all these same updates. It's not like a light switch. You have to be specific about, what that new rate is. For both our rate and boundary files that are, this publicly available database and, that's going to be a whole new layer if that should come to pass in our rate finder too, that we work with BCGI on. And then like same, programming it into our system, adding new lines on the return. I think a lot of that work is going to be as if a new town has come online for the first time.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, I just want to add to this conversation. I presented a bill 766, which you may know about, adding because my town asked me to do this to tax gas at local gas stations for local option tax. And in the process, you find out that would require setting up a whole new tax system and would be hugely expensive. So I just that confirmation. I'm gonna and hoping that this possible increase in local option tax might do the job for my town. But it was a great idea, but not really feasible.
Yeah. I mean, part of the elegance of the local option tax as it is, designed in statute today is just like the way it neatly attaches to one of our state tax types that are, tried and true, really, strong enforcement and, great filer experience. Like most of this is done electronically. We have a really great system. And it makes all of this pretty straightforward. And, as I'm describing in just like the compliance context, like a lot of what we do to administer local option tax is very related to what we do to administer the underlying tax types as well. So that's nice. So yeah, when, we're venturing into something that the tax department doesn't administer for us, then it's either like, DMV gets to, grow all these skills or, we go off into a new adventure. So yeah, not quite as, tightly aligned there.
Could you give us a little bit of a background of some of that conversation perhaps that Representative Burke is talking about in terms of you mentioned what was feasible or not feasible, or I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about a little bit about how gasoline, whether it was per gallons versus per, do you have a sales tax on gasoline? Could you do it that way? If it's not one of your three, if it's not rooms and meals, if it's not alcohol, then general merchandise or whatever you call it. So, but could there not be a fourth item that is gasoline, or could gasoline just be treated as just as the same as it was a Snickers bar that was sold in the convenience store?
Yeah, well, Snickers might be tax exempt.
Oh.
It's really interesting because some candy falls under the food exemption if it has like flour in it. Thank you, like a Twix bar or something. Yeah, while other candy is candy and it's not food and it's taxable. So that's one nuance. Yeah.
I don't, then you get into prepared foods and I was gonna say, how about a sandwich? But then I don't know.
Well, I think this is a really interesting question. I do want to be like very careful here because I really know nothing about taxing gasoline because of, the way administration is split in our state. DMV fully handles that world. I don't know of any, if there was a sales tax on gasoline at the pump, like a consumer sales tax, like that would be a place that one could apply a local option tax, but my understanding is that right now it is taxed at the wholesaler level, which is relatively new understanding since our conversation. We don't think about it that much. So, and it wouldn't only be like a new taxable event for a consumer. It would also be like a brand new structure and environment for the businesses that do this work, right? Like tracking sales, collecting, remitting, and there's kind of like the basics of we call them trust taxes, sales and use and meals and rooms, which is like a kind of like a old timey term for, the fact that, like, reflecting the fact that a business collects the tax on behalf of the state, holds it in trust, and then remits it, once a month or once a quarter. But there's a lot of, associated administration that goes along with that, like, a huge amount of regulation, but, exemptions and all the, intricacies of what is taxable and what isn't, bundled transactions, timing impacts, all the appeal rights and, enforcement statute. So it's pretty like impressive how much goes into, like, creating a body of tax like that.
So in the idea that you said a Twix bar might not be and another one may be, but you also have like clothing that's exempt, or what is it easy? Is gasoline somehow handled before that? It's not even put into that category? Like, how does it must be exempt from sales? Is it on the same list of exemption?
That's a really good
How is that
question. And I'm not-
exempted before? Must be handled in some statute way that would
Absolutely.
get it not to get into the list of exemptions, or is it in the list of exemptions? You see what I'm, like,
Yeah,
otherwise it's
it's
just
either-
another product.
Totally. It either is tangible personal property, which is kind of like the basis of our sales tax base, and it is exempted, or it is not even considered tangible personal property.
So-
And now, I don't know the answer to that, and I'll certainly get right back to you guys on that too. That's a good question.
Representative Pike?
Yeah, this is fascinating. We understand that, the gas tax is completely outside of your realm, and it's been around since 1920s or so. And we've been told that the efficiency of collecting it, or how much it costs to collect a dollar, they're saying maybe it's only 1-2% that go into the work to collect the money, making it very efficient. Do you know what the sales tax is and what the local option tax might add to it? I mean, does it take 10%, 10 cents to collect a dollar, or do you know what that is?
Yeah, well, for local option tax specifically, we approach this, pretty bluntly by collecting a per return fee. The tax department does, yeah. So, our administrative costs are very much covered by that fee. Well, I shouldn't say very much covered. There was a time in the legislature, when I was just an analyst, that we were proactively coming to the state house and saying, oh, we should address this fee. It feels like a little too much for what we do. And now we are using that fee right up. I promise. It's we just, the amount of local option tax and just the complexity, with the move to like more and more e-commerce has really, just completely changed administration of this tax. It's much more.
So the fee is a monthly fee or whatever.
Yeah, it's
that helps you process what they send in to you, I guess. That makes sense. But on just the sales tax, you go to the
Like
grocery
efficiency.
store, go to whatever. Yeah, well, do you know what the efficiency of that is? Like,
No, my former commissioner made a great infographic after like a deep data dive. And I think across the board, we determined that it cost us a penny to raise a dollar
okay,
across our tax types. And I'm not sure that broke out more specificity than that.
suffice to say, it's pretty efficient.
Yeah, we have worked. Yeah, we are very efficient at this. I'm proud to say. We're very lucky to have an IT system that works amazingly well. And this is the same vendor that is now working with DMV and labor. So
The sales reports that people file, that all the filers have to file. I'm assuming with a lot of seasonal business, you still have to file them every month, even if it's $0 to report.
a really good question. There is
So maybe-
actually, yeah,
You still collect the $5.69?
Yeah, no, we do have-
$0 ones?
we do have filing frequencies below the monthly level, but they are for smaller businesses. So, there's monthly, there's quarterly filers, and then it's either called seasonal or occasional. I think maybe there used to be both, and maybe we collapsed them into one. So there is something, it's kind of like for your farmers market vendors, your Christmas market vendors, we're just like having a, occasional interaction with our tax code. If you are, if you are a monthly filer and you have an off month, like, you close the shop and go to Florida for a couple months or something, you still have to file a 0 return. that's yeah. That's so that's like, you know, kind of part of the enforcement there is making sure we want to make sure like folks aren't getting out of the practice of filing their monthly returns, because when you're at that level, this is really as I said, these are trust taxes. You're holding a lot of cash that belonged to Vermonters and is destined for the state, and it's, you know, we don't want it just sitting in your store for a while. So like, yeah, that's the filing frequencies are scaled based on what your like last year's annual sales were. But many of like the, you know, a normal size business and above is filing monthly.
Yes, Representative White.
Thank you. Couple questions. So first, just clarifying, local option tax, you're talking about got zip codes, town lines, the local option tax for, say, Montpelier. Even if the Montpelier zip code goes into 4 other towns, does the local option tax go with the zip code? Does it follow the zip code or does it follow the town
I
line?
wish it could follow the zip code, but no, it has to follow the like jurisdictional lines of Montpelier itself. And that's why, you know, like there was, you know, I think in the before times, so when there wasn't so much e-commerce, yeah, you would, you know, like you could kind of take shortcuts, like thinking about zip codes as more relevant in this space. But now it's, you really have to geolocate the destination of all your sales, and you have to geolocate where your store is in space, you know, like yeah, I think, you know, it seems kind of clear. Well, I don't know, even I live in Berlin now and still kind of feel like I live in Montpelier. So even that line I think can be a little mushy, but that's kind of where the example of having like a headquarters, like somewhere, you know, out west, you know, they like that headquarters POS system might not have the nuance of, you know, Berlin, Montpelier even, you know, and there's a lot of, you know, big box stores in that area that, you know, have yeah, that might be struggling with just even knowing where they are in time or in space, much less like an e-commerce vendor who doesn't have any foothold in Vermont, you know, making delivery. So you can't rely on the zip code. You can't even rely on the 9-digit zip code. Like that's, I think, a common misconception that, oh, if you just like put a 9-digit zip code on an address, then this will all get sorted out. It's about like being able to geolocate where that 9-digit zip code is. Is it in Middlesex or is it in Montpelier or is it in Worcester? You know, USPS is going to call those all Montpelier. So you really, you know, you need the type of tools, this rate and boundary file, for example, or our like handy clickable local option tax finder to really, you know, verify where something is going.
Okay, and my second question is, so looking at the sales tax that has been added to public charging stations, public EV charging.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the decision to put a sales tax on that versus a tax that can go to the DMV, like the gas tax, since the gas tax is fueling automobiles and the electric vehicle chargers are charging automobiles. So was that just legislated, or was that a decision that was made in the tax department? And do you know the rationale behind that? Because that confuses me.
Yeah, very good question.
I feel like that's a great opportunity to make some money for transportation because it's supporting transportation.
Yeah, totally understand that. So, so the sales tax has always applied to electricity with an exemption for residential. So there is, you know, there are many, you know, non-residential uses of electricity that are just taxable under the sales tax. So it's not that, to my knowledge, at least, legislators in the state house has not proactively said we're going to add a sales tax to these charging stations. They're just taxable under the sales tax, you know.
Because it's electricity.
Yeah, because it's electricity, and there hasn't been a, you know, proactive legislative decision to change that treatment yet. I think it, you know, it probably feels new because they are very new to themselves, you know. Yeah.
And do you have any idea how much revenue that 6% sales tax on level 2 and level 3 chargers is bringing into the state?
Another good question. I've seen an estimate that was done using external data, and I am going to pull it up. I really can do this efficiently. we, just, familiarity, this is a new committee for me, so some of this stuff, you'd hear me say all the time if I was in here more often, but we have like some pretty strict confidentiality requirements with our data at the tax department, and we don't have enough public charging stations to meet our 10 taxpayer threshold to make this data reportable. So we can't look at our returns and report to you what the exact number is. But I have seen an external estimate for EV charging station revenue that I'm gonna pull up any minute now.
You're saying like 10, we didn't meet the threshold for charging?
Yeah, we don't report on taxpayer information for groups below 10 individuals. So that could be like 10 individual people, 10 businesses. I don't.
Yeah, it just seems like we have way more, like this.
10 filers. I would say that 10, like
Oh,
10,
vendors.
10 perhaps maple fields, if that's one of them, or those. But then the amount of apps and stuff that we saw, there's the amount of apps that are supposedly selling electricity that should be paying a sales tax seemed like it was, but it's a brand new burgeoning business. You wonder which is what we found from that, but
Yeah.
so yes, there were more than 10 apps up on that.
Yeah.
Some of these may be aggregated under the same.
Oh, yeah,
taxpayer. Yeah. And also this isn't like fresh from today. This is,
It's interesting.
I'm not sure how long ago I looked at this.
I was just like, okay, 10.
Well, we're all feeling like there's a money opportunity there somewhere because we're all grasping for pennies.
Understand what's,
We have a spot where we collect cans now for the transportation.
Green up to here.
Talking about, yeah, we had a jar, and we have a bake sale on Fridays. We're gonna pass the hat soon.
Know that expression, it'll be a fun day when the Air Force is there.
Yes.
Has to hold a big sale and it's been everything.
All right, I found a friend.
Boy.
I can chime in from the bench if I don't get this soon.
And the beach.
I'm happy to wait on that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the answer, but yeah.
But in the meantime.
Yeah.
Well, you said no multitasking.
I know, it's really. I'm like, am I reading my notes now? Don't do it. Yeah. I got headbutted by one yesterday. Lovingly, followed by a lot of kisses. Sorry, I digress. Are there any more local option tax questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Oops, we got
I think this committee is gonna get involved in EV charging in this. When do you charge tax? When do you not charge tax? As part of that sort of question. So just to understand when you charge tax for electricity. So I imagine a ski mountain with, lifts and pumps, they use a lot of electricity. Do they pay tax on the electricity that they use to run their business?
Yeah, my understanding would be that the residential exemptions certainly wouldn't apply to them if they're like organized as a nonprofit, or if there's some other ski related exemption I'm not thinking of that could be at play, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna venture to say yes.
But now a manufacturing
Record it, that's
a
right.
manufacturing company that runs machines and makes things, do they pay electric tax on their electricity?
I know that there are significant amounts of sales tax exemptions for machinery, equipment, manufacturing, and I cannot recall if electricity itself is one of those inputs. I can imagine colleagues back at the department are like slapping their foreheads right now that I don't remember this stuff.
I guess my question gets back to the charging, really is, who's responsible to calculate that amount? So if the ski resort, maybe they're exempt, maybe they're not, but is it Green Mountain Power that says we sold you X amount? Or is it, the ski resort who says, here's how much electricity we used, here's.
Great question. It'd be the former. It's the vendor who's managing.
To their bill, and then they submit it to you like any other.
Right, yeah, like some of their customers will be tax exempt customers, like their residences, or, you know, if they fall under another exemption. And yeah, in many cases, for sales tax exemptions, you present an exemption certificate to your vendor. That's like a form with the tax department, say I'm exempt for this reason, could be something like that. You know, I'm sure like that happens like once, and then you're kind of like lodged as an exempt customer.
All right, we're gonna, one more question and we're moving on.
Yeah, hopefully quick. I just was looking at the list of towns that are interested in lots this year, and I'm just wondering if that is like a market increase. It just seems like a lot in one year. Are there any trends like year over year in terms of towns interest?
Yeah, I mean, for data requests, this is pretty frequent. I think, you know, it's common for, you know, municipal officials or even just like other, you know, folks that have municipal roles in the town to want to get into this and explore it. And all this is available online. You know, folks can navigate it themselves, but we like to, you know, be helpful for making sure municipalities know what they're getting into and what they could potentially get out of it. You know, despite how streamlined it is from our perspective, it's still complicated, you know. So, you know, want to make sure folks are going in like eyes wide open what they're signing up for with the revenue split, with the department's fee, you know, walk through all that. So I'm not surprised to see so many data requests. We certainly have seen an uptick in local option tax since the legislature a couple of years ago removed the requirement for most towns to come here and have their charters approved once they vote a local option tax. Now all it takes is a vote at the local level, up, you know, assuming you're staying within the framework and Title 24 of like, you know, what's allowable under the current local option tax structure. If, you know, you're trying to do something more custom, that will land you back here at the State House for review from the General Assembly. But yeah, since that step was taken out, we've certainly seen more local option tax towns come online and expect that to continue.
Just gonna make a comment.
Quick.
And that it's probably also that towns are much more strapped, you know, property taxes. That combination, I think.
Pressure on find some other answer other than property taxes is real and is everywhere. I will say that we appreciate you coming in, new committee for you, and our members are always interested in learning more and digging in, as you can see. So
Yeah.
appreciate the chance for you to come in, and thank you very much. And
Yeah, great to meet everyone. Just call us back anytime.
Just have a different.
Thank you. Very taxing conversation.
we leave very little time for the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns to tell us what they thought of what they've heard in the Senate the last couple of testimonies regarding the local option tax, the Stowe 2% concept, the perhaps sharing of revenue into town highways. All of it. What we're looking to hear about is the League of Cities and Towns initial, maybe it's not a formal opinion yet, but a take on what's been discussed in the Senate the last few days and what we joined this morning.
Great. So Josh Hanford, Director of Intergovernmental Relations at the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And that's good that that's what you want to hear, because that's what I was going to talk about. Just first big picture, you know, we went into this session with a list of priorities, and under transportation, we had a lot of them that basically said we'd support any new revenue that we can come up with from any place, anyhow. We're not going to be obstructionist to anyone that's got an idea on the table. We specifically called for a full transfer of the purchase and use tax from the Ed Fund back to the Transportation Fund. We know that's under discussion, and there's a 10 million step up. Some of the reasons that people expressed why we can't do that don't seem relative to municipalities. The property tax shift has already happened a long time ago, and municipalities are raising transportation fund revenue on their side of the property tax bill. So the folks saying that's an argument not to do this, it just doesn't make any sense from our perspective, because we've already been doing that for a long time. One of the other issues before I jump into exact, well, it's related, but there is a pilot surplus, as I think you heard from the overview. It's about 15 million now. You know, last year we were talking about returning that to the municipalities that sort of overpaid their local option tax, if you will. Obviously, we weren't successful with that request, but we were successful in bringing the pilot retained percent of the 1% down from 30%. of the 1% to 25% of the 1%. That clearly is meeting the need in the surplus. It's growing, and we just had, what, 5 or 7 towns last year add local option tax. I would very much agree with the list you saw from the tax department on the 18 towns considering it right now. We have recently just heard from a reporter that's interviewed every town and says that there's 17 considering it. We'll see on town meeting day but it clearly is becoming more of a place municipalities are going to collect needed revenue to just run local government. Otherwise, it goes on the property tax bill. With that, there's some concerning trends with that pilot surplus. This year, in the governor's FY27, he marked almost 4 million to go towards paying for the statewide property appraisal and equalization study out of the surplus, and House approach added it to this year's BAA. So right now there's a proposal to take 8 million of that 15 million locally option tax generated surplus and use it to fund what the state has always paid for out of the general fund or the ed fund to actually assess the property valuations in every town in Vermont so that we could collect the state's education property largely on the backs of volunteers and folks that make very little money. And so using local option tax money from a few towns to pay for the state responsibility for what raises the most revenue in the entire state budget is rather concerning for us. It's a sign of real desperation that we've run out of money everywhere, or it's a sign of just not an understanding of how hard municipalities are facing with budget concerns, that we're going to use their own money to collect taxes for the state. With that aside, because it's related, Senator Westman's proposal, or the proposal that's being discussed in Senate Transportation, is appealing to us. Certainly, we think it can be improved in several ways, and I'll talk about those. But the fact that we could use a new local option tax to collect money to help with the transportation town highway aid is appealing. We think that the formula that is broken down in there could be improved. The 50% the towns keep, 40 goes to this local transportation fund, and then 10 goes to the pilot. Well, we don't need the 10. The pilot is more than enough money. It's got surplus that the state's finding ways to spend for other statewide needs. And then giving up 40% might not be too appealing to municipalities. They want to share, but I don't know if they want to share beyond 50% of what they collect. They ask their voters to vote. So we would propose, and this hasn't been fully vetted by all of the LCT members, it's just so new, but the ones we've talked to feel that they could get behind this if it's revised. And I think it would work better with the tax department's current processing and collection, where it's a 75-25 split. So if this authority is granted, we always support municipal authority to raise revenue locally. Whether they choose to take it up or not, that's up to the municipality. We don't pressure municipalities to adopt this. We provide them tools and resources, and they make their own decision on what their voters feel is right thing to do. But if we allowed municipalities to retain 75% of this new 1% authority, they might put it towards transportation. If that's their most pressing need, they might use it for something else if it's their most pressing need. But the 25% going to this new local options municipal transportation special fund is a good idea. And we think more municipalities would take this opportunity if they got to keep the majority of what they raised, but yet they're helping their neighboring municipalities. 45% is not something to just laugh at. It could grow. And if the trends continue, if there's even 10 municipalities that adopt local option tax this year, that's just going to keep growing. And so we think it's, if the goal is to get folks to use this, changing those percentages to 75-25 will get us there. The bill also includes a $3 million appropriation from the pilot surplus fund to sort of support the town highway aid, and it's sort of a lockbox. It's above the minimum thresholds that this committee helped put in, so it can't be used to like offset what VTrans would normally give us, which is great. I can't comment yet if the municipalities would support that, because As I said, municipalities wanted the pilot surplus return to those municipalities that raised it. But each year we don't do that. It's harder and harder to calculate how to reimburse them. And I can tell you that municipalities would much rather see the surplus, if it's not returned to them, to go to something that every municipality benefits from. Every municipality has roads. And it's the only program that I'm aware of in state government that actually has a formula that everyone gets something. It's not competitive. It's not you win or you lose from this. Everyone gets something. So that seems to me much more reasonable than how we've been spending the pilot surplus so far on other state responsibilities. So what I told Senate Transportation this morning is we're appreciative of this outside of the box thinking. We think we can improve this to make it more desirable for municipalities to pick this up and run with it. And we'll be open to other ideas. I think the conversation around the public charging stations and what they're paying in sales tax is fascinating. Seems like there's a really good use for that sales tax. Happy to engage on that conversation. You know, I know that Representative Burke's proposal with the gas tax is harder to maybe administer and stand up. I think the benefit of something like this, if you actually run through the numbers, and I'm not here prepared with data sets that can prove this to you, but I think in concept, people will agree. The challenge that Brattleboro was expressing in other communities of visitors and others that are using the roads that aren't contributing to the cost of maintaining those, this is a more elegant way to do that. So you could have someone visiting Mount Snow that is driving up from, southern New England in a fully electric vehicle, but they're staying at a hotel or an Airbnb, paying 1% local option there. They're going out to dinner, having a nice dinner. They're paying local option there. All those pieces and points, if it's contributed in this new 1% authority with a transportation aid fund, I would venture to guess raises a lot more money than if you just did local option on gas. Because it's not, one, picking up electric vehicle drivers. Two, it's a smaller percentage of all those other sales that are happening, and yet it's being dedicated to benefit the same goal that your idea had. So it really could be something we should consider working with and looking at how to improve it. And sort of, I would commit to working with our members on trying to get them to understand the opportunity that's here and the pilot surplus challenge. If we don't dedicate it to something, it's going to be nickel and dimed away without a direct benefit. And so this may be a place of compromise to work on.
Okay. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
I have a couple of different pieces. Pilot is not a transportation topic that I can help you. I'm glad you got a chance to share everybody your opinion, but we can't take that up in this area. It's not our purview in terms of the pilot fund, but I'm happy to.
Other than there's an appropriation in this bill from the pilot.
The other, what they did with the money and that part, I can't go back on that, but we can, we're also in a spot where I let the committee get too far ahead on the last subject. So we have a traveled visitor to testimony that I've already postponed once.
Yep.
You're in the building.
Yep.
I would like to bring you back if you.
I see this as a start, so no problem. Happy to share with Rita.
Well, a big question on what we heard in the Senate piece that I think you're hearing, that I thought I heard, and I know you could confirm, that towns that do have the ability to raise local option tax understand that when it comes to roads, there are towns that are feeders. In effect, like we discussed this morning, that in effect, they understand that some towns don't have the ability to raise those additional funds and whatnot. To this idea that if it was Stowe, that there are all kinds of feeder towns that are using the transportation network to get in and out. And is that what drives the idea that they said they would be willing to share that 25 if they knew it was going to towns, other town highway budgets? Is that particular part that they're saying that if they got 75 back and 25 was going to a town highway trust or a fund of some sort, that they think that is valuable? What's the?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak directly
to that. Or what you said you would support something in that direction.
I can't speak to what Stowe's exact reaction is.
Your perspective, why are you okay with that 20, or tell me,
Yeah.
what's the reasonings? And I'm glad, but I want to hear
Yeah.
what your thoughts are there.
I think you raise valuable points into others. There's some small towns that they don't have a lot of revenue to raise from 1%. Sure, there's online sales coming to every municipality in the state. And in fact, there are Airbnbs in every municipality in the state. So there is a chance for them to raise something there, but it maybe not substantial enough but yet there are feeder roads. There's a benefit to a transportation network that works for everyone and has some way for us all to stop the free fall that the transportation fund budget is in without any real solutions at this point. And so I think we share that pain, feel it every day. And so we've got to give something to here if the General Assembly is willing to put something forward.
Thank you
In that spirit.
very much for that, and we'll have you back for all the questions that I know everybody has.
Yeah.
I want to be fair to somebody I've already rescheduled and has traveled here to be with us. So we know we can get you again for
Absolutely.
next week. So Ariel will be in touch and you guys can jump on your questions from there.
Thank you.
So you're still on my charger? I'm willing to share, just like the League of Cities and Towns. I just learned that would be a no, I guess, but
No,
please.
right.
So, Rita, this will be our, well, you're the anchor of our regional planning commission's cleanup position. There you go. Is that a cleanup?
Super quickly, Mr. Chair, Sarah Fairhoff with the Department of Taxes, it is $400,000 from electric vehicle driven state.
400,000?
400.
That pays sales tax now, and I suspect growing.
Yeah, yeah.
And Sarah, that was based on 2025, 2024?
Okay, so we got that other seconds while you're setting up, and we've gone kind of tour all the way around the state with regional planning commissions. We're gonna have some committee discussion time on the agenda. Help me out, Gabrielle, later this week about what we've heard, and if there's any particular in those trends, things that we want to potentially try to address. So that's on the committee discussion time for this week. And adding cleanup out of the Ottaquiche region. It's a fun word to say. Did I get it right? The Ottaquiche?
Yes.
Two Rivers Ottaquiche Regional Commission.
Thank you
Welcome.
all for being able to meet with me. My name is Rita Cito with the Two Rivers Ottaquiche Regional Planning Commission. I am the senior transportation planner there. I work with Peter Gregory. I'm gonna double check. I don't have like feedback. Okay, so I'm told that you've met with my other counterparts last week, so I guess I am the designated hitter to kind of clean up for this week. So thank you. So to give you an idea, for the Two Rivers region, we are kind of the east central region of Vermont. We are one of the larger regions that cover 32 municipalities. What's interesting is a lot of our economy is related to New Hampshire and the Upper Valley. Dartmouth College and the Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center is kind of our key economic drivers that pull a lot from our region into New Hampshire. So a lot of our transportation needs and everything else are kind of derived from that. Our municipalities cover 4 counties, which is kind of interesting. A lot of our other counterparts, they kind of focus on 1 or 2 counties. We cover 4, which makes, you know, during a FEMA disaster declaration very interesting when they come and they kind of designate their FEMA folks that's kind of county based. Our region is roughly about 50,000 folks, just a little under. We have 2 major interstates that cross our region, 91 and 89. We also have a key east-west corridor with Route 4 that would connect with Rutland. And as you know, it's a major trucking route. We also have an active Transportation Advisory Committee, and we also meet with our road foreman committee as well. So you've heard from our counterparts last week with the regional planning commissions. We have a fantastic relationship with the transportation planning initiative with VTrans. So we provide a lot of various technical planning assistance to our towns. Data collection, public engagement, project development. So we advocate for our towns for different projects. We also have different impacts and input to VTrans different projects, model plans. So I'm not going to really cover that as much because I think you've kind of heard of that. I do want to focus on 4 different areas of not concern, but kind of categories I want to kind of focus on from our region. The first one is on public transit. We have 2 public transit agencies that are covering our region. Tri-Valley Transit, which focuses on commuter routes, as well as the O&D program that covers Medicaid transportation. And then we also have Advanced Transit, which is kind of a unique public transit agency. It's one of the few bi-state public transit agencies that we share with New Hampshire. So they are pretty active. That kind of focuses a lot of ridership around the Dartmouth College and the hospital economic driver of the Upper Valley. So ridership has definitely decreased since post-COVID. We, especially with Tri-Valley Transit, their O&D program has really suffered a lot. Obviously, a lot of their rides were focused on providing rides to older adults and bringing them to senior centers. During COVID, all of that pretty much stopped. Post-COVID, some of those senior centers that offer meal sites have even shut down completely. So that has impacted a lot of services that can provide to those clients. They also have impacted the volunteer driver program that Tri-Valley Transit has really built up over the years pre-COVID. Their volunteer ridership program has been reduced almost by half post-COVID, and they're doing their best to try to market and kind of rebuild that volunteer driver program back. They really do rely on that because it has been determined that is least costly in providing those transportation trips versus trying to find a van or something that is wheelchair accessible that can transport one-on-one to wherever their clients need. So that is kind of the overview of public transit. We understand with the older population, there are less available riders or drivers that can kind of provide those rides. They're doing everything that they can to kind of market to students, to those that are working remotely that have some hours during their week to kind of provide those services. It's slow going, but they're slowly kind of making it back up. But also with the cost of car ownership and things like that, that has really kind of impacted the availability of volunteers for the program. So bridges and culverts is a big infrastructure piece in our region. I began my career at Two Rivers in 2007, so you can say that I'm one of the very few Irene veterans left that have kind of been through it with the towns. Our region was significantly impacted during Irene. And then post then, we've had a couple other FEMA declared disasters in 2017, 2019, and 2023. We've worked very closely over the years since Irene with Vermont Emergency Management and VTrans and towns to kind of establish I guess you could say, a protocol for when disasters or events kind of occur, that we are here for them. I work closely with their road foreman to know that, any sort of weather systems, a quick text message or something to check if they're okay, or having that relationship with them. They really appreciate the oversight that we have, just to make sure that they're okay. So from that, we had a lot of different lessons learned from Irene. One of them was the town roads and bridges standards that VTrans has improved over the years. Towns have also been using that to kind of improve their infrastructure over the years with upsizing culverts and how to improve their road buildings infrastructure. They've also taken advantage of a lot of various grants that are available to improve all of their road infrastructure, which also includes the most recent municipal roads general permit, which then kind of fed into the newer V-Trans grants and aid program that focuses on ditching and culverts. So many of our towns have really taken advantage of these grant programs to kind of slowly improve resilience in their roads and bridges. What they're finding is the culverts that are 3 foot, 4 foot, that undergo a hydraulic analysis. And then they determine that they need a much bigger structure, 2-3 times larger. The cost is significant. The funding sources that are available to cover the construction is shrinking. So right now there's only a handful of grant programs that can really cover the design and full construction of those culverts and bridges. And it can be quite onerous for towns. From the FEMA perspective, for hazard mitigation grants, what has been a real struggle for towns that are trying to find funding sources to cover roads and bridges, or at least bridge construction, is the sizing, the hydraulic analysis, as well as, with the hazard mitigation grant program, they want to show repeat damage to kind of prove benefit cost analysis. So what happens is with these little culverts that may get hit a couple times and then they get a hydraulic analysis completed that is 2-3 times the size, that gets fed into their benefit cost analysis formula. But then the number of beneficiaries or the residents that would serve doesn't quite spit out the right formula or the right number to say, oh yes, this is really beneficial, versus, oh, it only serves about 80 residents. It's not really beneficial to spend $2 million to upsize this bridge or this culvert that keeps washing out. And so towns are unable to do the right thing and upsize to what is the appropriate size. And they're unable to put in anything smaller because A&R's stream alteration permit will not allow them to put anything smaller. So they want to do the right thing, but they're kind of stuck between financing something more significant, but then risking it continuing to wash out because it's undersized. So a lot of our towns are kind of facing that, the double edge there of trying to balance the budget, but also how many times do we have to fix this bridge culvert?
I think we might need to hit mute or turn the volume off on your, we're getting a back echo, which usually means your volume is still on. Thank you.
Want it lower or more volume?
It's right off entirely, you're muted, but it sounds like it's already gone, whatever you were doing, so.
That was also distracting me.
Yeah, oh my God.
Thank you.
Representative Lally has a question for you. I'm sorry, I had to step out.
Please.
So I was intrigued when you said that the service area is roughly about 50,000 people. That is the sort of minimal size for a metropolitan planning organization. And I was wondering just where that might stand. I realize this is a more rural area, but are the attributes starting to change and become more reflective of some of the programs that could maybe bring benefits, including funding opportunities? And the other thing I was wondering in terms of transit was eligibility for stick factors in that area.
Right. So the population is just under 50, so it's not quite there. I know we've looked at that possibility of having the MPO status.
Okay.
And but I don't think we've, based on the census, we've really gotten quite to that level of, yes, it's like 50,010 people that, yes, we can definitely get it. It's always just been under, and so we've not been able to take advantage of that. Peter, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Peter Gregory, Director of Two Rivers Ottaquechee. I think actually the federal threshold may have increased from 50,000 as well. So I think it's firmly out of our reach at this point. But if it were to come into being, it would include New Hampshire towns, Hanover, Lebanon. It would be a bi-state MPO at some point.
So this is just an example of the infrastructure. This was from the April 2019 rainstorm that hit the lower portion of Bethel Mountain Road in Rochester. This road is fairly important. Bethel Mountain Road also connects to Camp Brook Road in Bethel. And this is considered a federal aid secondary road. It's a class 2 road from the town perspective. But once FEMA declaration does get hit or does get declared, federal highway emergency funds gets, assigned to this. So it's kind of a unique roadway. So you can kind of see the whole lower section of Bethel Mountain got hit. They worked pretty hard to kind of get a lot of this repaired because they were under the federal highway emergency program, which then they needed to get all the repairs done within, I believe, 180 days to get 100% funding covered. So that was huge for the town. It was definitely a big rush because from April to fall before snow hits, they were really struggling to miss the deadline and getting all their design permits and all that fun stuff kind of squared away. This road is also, sorry, go ahead.
This Bethel, over Bethel Mountain, that's a road, even though it's a town road, that's on the federal.
Aid secondary,
Yeah,
yes.
right, okay.
And and we have a couple of those in the region where we've flagged them for towns, especially if they have staff turnover, road foreman turnover, that may not necessarily understand the distinction that during a federal declared disaster, if these particular roads get hit, to notify us so we can make sure VTrans is aware so that they can start the clock and sure. Because we ran into that during Irene with a couple of our towns where FEMA was, in the room, and then it wasn't, a few months later until they realized, oh, this is actually should be covered under federal highway. And so they've lost time to kind of do that.
And what?
Yeah, so just along those lines, so just so I understand, in a disaster, you've got FEMA.
Yep.
And you've got federal highway.
Right.
Two different sources to help repair roads for towns. And the distinction, is FEMA only dealing with highway? Like, where's the distinction?
Sure. So for FEMA, those are for your typical town highway class 2 and 3 roads. There are certain class 2 roads in town that have a designation of the federal aid secondary designation. And the only special designation is that during a FEMA declared disaster, a switch gets clicked, and then that particular road, instead of being covered under FEMA funds, it gets covered under federal highway emergency.
So that's a decision that FEMA makes?
No, it's.
Or they've already been designated?
It's already been designated under, I believe there's like a federal highway classification for the roads. So you can ask, either your towns or, V-Trans mapping has those, classifications pulled out. Yeah.
And then I had one other question on when you were on the previous slide, the culvert, you're talking about that balancing act or challenge between A&R saying, you can't have a culvert that's too small. And then FEMA, is it that FEMA, because my understanding was that, at least in my towns, that FEMA would only replace the exact same size of culvert, like they wouldn't pay for upsizing a culvert,
Right.
which is what we want to do for better resiliency, but, and so is that what you're referring to? And
That as well,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. So sometimes too, it's, what is FEMA gonna dictate or what are they gonna actually cover under like a project worksheet? And so usually the first thing is, well, do you have a hydraulic study? Prove to us what sizing is going to be appropriate. And so usually A&R will provide the hydraulic study and say, well, we recommend a culvert size that's gonna be 3 times as big. And we are only going to issue a stream alteration permit to allow you to put something this big. We're not gonna let you put anything smaller because that's, it's not gonna be big enough. Right. And then FEMA would say, well, I haven't been involved recently with how FEMA's been deciding on their awards of, the mitigation. I'm told they have been providing some mitigation funding to towns, but it may or may not necessarily be related to upsizing culverts. So I think it also depends on who the FEMA project person is.
And you also referenced that FEMA is looking at the population size to determine whether or not they would award something.
So there's, I guess you could say there's like the 2 sources of funding from FEMA. There's one source where, there's active damage to the culvert and there's like the project worksheet to get it repaired. And then there's the other one where, it may got repaired, but FEMA's not going to really upsize it. So they're going to persuade the town to go and apply for the hazard mitigation grant program, which is like a separate funding source. And with that, the grant program requires a benefit cost analysis that goes with it. And so with that, the town needs to prove that, with the sizing, as well as how many residents or how many people is it going to benefit by upsizing, and get crunched into a certain formula to spit out basically, does it benefit or does it not benefit? And sometimes there's not enough residents around for that structure to really benefit from the eyes from the grant program to say, yes, we're going to award this program to upsize this culvert. Yep. So towns are kind of stuck in terms of available funding source to kind of do the right thing.
And that's a federal hazard mitigation. Correct.
And so, every time there's a declared disaster, there's a particular bridge in Bethel that has, on Camp Brook Road, that has had previous damage from like previous FEMA disaster. And so we are like, okay, one more disaster. Because, previously they said, well, let's, FEMA would always be like, well, if you get 3 disasters, that should be enough to kind of hit the benefit cost analysis. And so this particular bridge in Bethel was one away from kind of meeting the BCA possibility. And so the 2023 flood was talking to the towns, like, oh, so did it get flooded? I'm like, well, no. I said, well, it should have gotten flooded. He said, well, unfortunately, a Good Samaritan neighbor had their excavator out, kind of prevent. I'm like, no. So we could have gotten it flooded to get to kind of meet the VCA, but so anyways, he's aware now to just let it go next time.
Representative
It's kind
Katie.
of crazy to think that, but yeah.
It would be great if that neighbor took his excavator, went down that whole road. I have to go over it every
Oh, you
morning,
do?
over that road, yeah.
Yeah,
My teeth are all loose.
from all the.
Going up and over. it all the time.
Yes, yes. So yeah, those are kind of the interesting stories that we kind of like work with our towns to get their bridges and culverts kind of fixed and just wait for the next disaster kind of thing. All right, so the other thing that we kind of do focus on in our region is bike ped infrastructure. Our towns are very supportive of complete streets. They want bike ped infrastructure in towns. We do focus a lot and assist on the V-Trans bike ped and their transportation alternatives program to apply for these programs for bike ped improvements. We feel like the annual, $3 million allocation to the program is really not sufficient. A lot of these bike ped project scale can run at least up to $1 million easy for, different programs. So, and what I found is, we've managed a lot over the years of these different bike ped programs, and we understand that, after a while, the costs kind of increase. And so by the time the grant gets awarded and by the time it goes to construction, the costs have really increased to the point where, they're coming back for enhancements. And so we hope that the V-Trans will continue to prioritize allocating funding to complete existing grant projects before awarding these so that they can finish what's going on.
Yeah, I think our town has hit that a few times. We've, had a project, we got some pricing, it took a little while. Then all of a sudden we had estimates, and then by the time, which might be a couple of years, you finally get an estimate for the cost. Oh, it's more. So then we have this again, another delay. So your recommendation is maybe sort of slow the process down and move the projects faster.
Right.
Or make things move faster so we don't have those delays.
Right. Yeah. I know over the last 5 years, the costs have just been really challenging to kind of pinpoint, pre-COVID and then post-COVID. We had, the post-COVID issues with, materials kind of increasing, the lack of labor, the war of Ukraine kind of like causing havoc with materials everywhere. It's just everywhere. And so we've done our best in terms of taking whatever the consulting firms have scoped out in terms, and we've put as much contingency as possible and inflation, but it still is just not enough to say we can go to this one pod. This is our best guess estimate. Things kind of pop up. I have, one of the projects that I'm working on is a concrete retaining wall that we gave the best estimate, and now we're at least 200,000 plus because of everything. So it's, and then the towns are like, well, do we continue? Do we not continue? We want this project, but how much more is it going to take to complete this project? So I also want to kind of point out too, this is one of the bigger projects that I'm managing actively right now in South Royalton Village. It's kind of an interesting project. It is not your typical sidewalk project. Those of you familiar, the South Royalton Village by the law school, you have the block with all the businesses there. The scope of this is really to bring the sidewalk up so that it meets ADA standards. So when you enter the entrances of the storefronts, they will be level. So it's a very big, bold vision to kind of really refresh the downtown area with some, gentle sloping ramps. They're going to, extend the sidewalk out at least 10 feet. They're going to have really nice patio areas and sitting areas and just a really nicer pedestrian accessibility through the village here while still navigating, the parking and like the loading for the business trips and things like that.
EV chargers planned on that location?
It was not included in this scope. I know the town is looking at possibly looking at EV charging elsewhere along the green there.
Yeah.
So So, yeah.
Teed up for it.
it's teed up. We're working through the right of way right now. It's kind of interesting because there's a post office involved as well as the railroad. So we're doing our best to kind of navigate all that. But we're hoping to go to construction in 2027. But one of the pieces with this is the cost of the construction has increased by $1 million. It has significant historic preservation components, the historic columns there that we want to improve and kind of keep. And so there's a lot of components that have really increased the cost of this. The town is still very supportive of this transformation. They're actually like, what's taking so long? But we're working through the right of way and with the railroad, and we are hoping to go to construction for 2027. We also need to go back to ask for an enhancement as well. So, but once that's done, we hope you can all come down to take a visit to see how the transformation has occurred. But the bike ped program does. I was quite surprised they actually awarded this because it's such a large scale and it eats up a good portion of the $3 million allocation at the time. But the scoring criteria really it hit a lot of the high points of what they wanted to meet. Meets a lot of the serves a lot of the different businesses, the people in the village, creating a safer pedestrian walkway, all of those things. So we're really excited about this program and project.
Is South Royalton a community that's served by municipal wastewater?
Yes, I believe they do. Yeah.
Leverages that. It's great.
And it's right next to the law school as well. So we're hoping to really to kind of keep this flourishing.
It's great. I always thought that South Royalton was real diamond in the rough. So this is exciting.
I know the town has also been kind of working on, they have a plan to kind of improve the sidewalk network in the rest of the village as well, eventually. So they're slowly chugging away at that.
You got a couple more minutes?
Sure, great. So the last issue I wanted to talk about is and you might have heard from my other counterparts, is the RPCs have kind of become the de facto archivists for towns. Towns have in the last 5-6 years have really increased their turnover in town administration. Their key road foremen, the longtime road foremen, they're starting to retire. So you have these new ones that some stay, some don't stay, but like their turnover is more frequent. And so what is kind of happening is grant projects are kind of falling through the cracks. this particular town that I have on the spreadsheet here, they have a new town manager, new DPW director, and I've been able to kind of cobble out all the grants that they've had in the last 5 years. And how many have been completed. You can kind of see the ones that are highlighted in orange are the grants that they were unable to complete. That's about $257,000 that of potential grant projects that they had in hand that they just were unable to complete due to staffing changes and turnover, and just it's very frustrating, but also, you know, it also highlights the challenges of the rotation of staff, and having us being there to kind of help say, oh, remember, you have this project and don't forget this project and what, you know. So we're doing our best to kind of keep all of our 32 towns afloat as they kind of go through their transitions of staff. But it can be a lot. But it can be, it's hard to see them money on the table. So we want them to use it. And we know that you know, those funding sources are never kind of there, you know, like for sure there for a while. So we do hope to kind of have a more official role in the future, maybe just to kind of keep tabs on them. So yeah, that's just kind of a quick summary of like the kind of the 4 main issues I wanted to talk about from the region perspective. Peter, do you have anything else to add?
It's not.
If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out.
Representative Pouch.
You know, using the bike ped grant program and the transportation, the downtown fund, have you used some of those? Your experience?
Yes, there are some towns that have been able to utilize those. Particularly in the last round, we've had 2 towns that have participated in the Better Connections grant program. And I know in the last few rounds, they've been eligible to utilize that to do their sidewalks. Those are great. It is, I would say, less onerous, but the process to implement a sidewalk project through the Downtown Transportation Fund is definitely a little easier than going through the VTrans, the municipal assistance program, but only just because of the different funding requirements that come to it. Although the Downtown Transportation Fund, the cap is a little bit less.
Yeah.
So there's that balance of, you know, maybe towns can complete smaller sections with the Downtown Transportation Fund, and the bigger ones can go to the bigger federal funds. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, we really appreciate you coming in. Thank you for your patience with the reschedule.
No problem.
If that was the bonus of getting you to be here live, that was worth it. And we appreciate you hitting cleanup in our tour around the state of regional planning commissions. We are going to have a committee discussion and a sort of what's next or what we should look at later this week. I think it's on tomorrow's agenda, and we appreciate the time and the effort. And your 32 towns appreciate it.
Well,
Thank you. So now what we're going to do, and I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's Damien's coming up next. Every year we get a letter from the Appropriations Committee that says, please write us your priorities, your number 1, number 2, or issues with the budget, with the piece, and sort of where you're at with your budget review. And last year we wrote the letter, and while Damien's working his way up, I think we focused almost entirely on the JTOT piece last year. We're
going to start with Logan.
Oh, Logan's going to start. I'm sorry. Either way.
Questions, and then I'll start writing the letter since he has to go.
Okay. So we're going to, that's quite all right. We're going to figure that part out. I'm not sure if we're posting up the letter that we got from folks or not. Like, would come under, posted under today's
And also-
testimony or under,
Pull it. I have it pulled up if you want it on the.
oh, that would be great if you could put it on the screen. And I just, as far as reference that everybody's in the committee, that last year, I recall it anyway, unless somebody remembers it differently, we pretty much just focused on the JTOG transfer as our number one priority item last year. And that's what they did. You'll see the letter here in a second. We'll have to draft and respond by Friday. Our committee's piece, I would certainly suggest anyway, that part of the letter starts out that it's been known in the building, or we've worked hard to understand there's a $50 million transportation funding gap that's been in the works for a long time. Last year, you took big steps with the $20 million JTOG, and that knocked it down to a $30 million problem. We much appreciate that support. This budget is, obviously, they've gone through some pretty serious, machinations to make the closure of this year's 30 million. And so it's still there. And I'm sort of remember this is a historical issue, and it was 50 million, and we cut it back by 20 million last year. And in this year, there's a proposal in the budget to another 10 million from the purchase and use, and to fill up the other 20 million through the reduction in force and some conversions and all the other fees. I'm not saying that all has to be in there, but sort of the 50 million was cut by 20 million. We still have a $30 million hole when we get to this year based on the work last year. That's sort of the big picture. Thanking them for their work and appropriations last year. That'd be one of the suggestions I would have. And then we need to move forward and sort of answer the rest of the questions. So Logan's got the letter up there. You can maybe walk us through it real quick, or you can kind of follow it down. It's the basic pieces, and then it sort of.
Yeah, so for the record, Logan Murray at the Joint Fiscal Office. So this is the letter all the standing committees received from House Appropriations, asking you to look at the budget and let them know what you think. There's some links there. The one we're going to look at, or that I'll take you through at least, is the fiscal year 2027 budget language. This is the governor's recommended budget language. I will just go through and highlight some of the sections that relate specifically to transportation. There are a few in here that you should be aware of, and then can make your decisions and decide what you want to say in your letter. Also, not within the languages, the other things that you've been looking at budget-wise in your presentations. If you have anything in there that you want to mention, you could say that in this letter as well. As you all know, the appropriations or the work, the projects that get done in the White Book end up being appropriated in the budget themselves. So all these things can kind of go together. We'll want to read this, or else I can switch to the language and highlight some sections.
You can ask questions if you like.
Yeah, just the process, how we're going about it here. If we wanted to add to the present transportation budget from the administration, that's not in the budget, like something else. Do we have to get it on this letter? Or this is just like a polite way of letting
Yes.
those committees know? Okay.
I don't think you have to put it on the letter, but it's them sort of asking.
Yeah. Well, I feel it's, yeah. But if we were to, we have the T-bill budget.
Yep.
And I think in the past, this committee has said, all right, it's the same amount, but we're gonna take a little bit from here and put it in this category.
Yep.
In that case, it's probably not as important to get on that letter. Is that?
So at times the committee will make sort of like one-time appropriations or changes and stuff like that, you do within the T-bill. But once the T-bill goes to the appropriations committee, they usually strip all those out and hold them and will put them in the budget.
Yes.
So to the extent that you know what you want to do this period, it might be good to give them a heads up. Obviously, things come up and there can be other informal discussions between the committees so that everyone is made aware of it. This is just sort of the first, what do you think of the budget as proposed? Do you have any thoughts immediately that they should know about as they're starting their work? So they're as unsurprised as they can be surprised in the process, I guess.
Thanks.
Yeah.
As part of our review progress, we want to hear from your committees as to what you agree with, what you disagree with, and what your priorities in the budget area might be. And then there's a part, finally, if there's any new initiatives, you better put it in here now. It doesn't quite say that, but that's a little bit below, right at the bottom of the paragraph.
And does it say when this is due?
Friday,
Okay, and today's Wednesday.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
which is the same thing that we did last year in terms of your part about whether we make some changes within the amounts is not gonna make it on.
wouldn't necessarily get up.
This is a big, in my appropriations doesn't want to hear about our out of our $900 million budget. They're not looking at if we were to move hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is, my perception, big picture.
Yeah.
Let us know if we got a big problem coming our way that we're not aware of yet, is more of my.
Yeah, you can move chairs on the deck. They don't care less.
Yeah.
It's in the parameter. They just want to know if it's outside of that parameter. That's gonna affect their numbers.
Okay,
I just recall doing, when we're actually gonna do the T-bill is when we move that money.
Little bit, yeah.
from the letter itself. I remember putting things up, what's our priorities on the, 100,000 here, 200 there. But that was when we were gonna sign off on the T-bill.
Well, I think we did both simultaneously. There was a request
Yeah.
and then we figured out.
Yes, but not for this letter.
No, well, we just like, if there's, Logan, it's trying to treat you, not bad.
Yeah, I know. Well,
If there's a
it's still
request,
really
yeah.
nice discussion time.
Okay, yeah.
I think I put it there as,
You know, if somebody wants to say fund EVs for 20 million. We would request to the appropriations, we want 20 million for X. In this letter, you know, this is where the opportunity to do it, because they would have to find it.
So if I want to request the 15 million in purchasing
Yes.
instead of the 10, that's.
Yes.
probably-
It would go.
This would be the time.
I did put it down as committee business, so it's, I do expect some level of back and forth, and we'll keep it within the reins, and if I don't like it, we'll go on. So, Representative Burke, you're
So
up.
this budget include this, what's out there already includes the 10 million.
Yes. Perhaps we could bring up last year's letter if that's easily
And
found.
then
or-
another
Got it.
question. If I had,
Share thing?
for
Yeah, let's
example,
take that.
in the 863 bill that we just presented, a lot of the things were level fund, programs, et cetera. But there was a line item in there that was in last year's T bill of 325,000 for Drive Electric Vermont. I would like us to consider.
I would say that I suspect we could add some things that may be under consideration, depending on their dollar value, or that we are continuing to work on the budget, but not a but the sort of how I view this is they're looking for our reaction to the governor's budget, and they're looking for high level things that should be on their radar. They're not in writing. And so I guess I have this idea, if it's got 1 comma, it probably doesn't go in the letter. If it's got 2, it better been already, long since.
Yeah, but the question is where are you going to get it? If you're saying, I can find it in the maintenance budget, we don't need to put that in the letter. But if you're saying appropriations, find this money,
I mean,
that's something
I don't
else.
know. Where
Yeah,
do we
well,
find
yeah.
$325,000?
Yeah.
And then I guess the other thing is we had heard that maybe there's some other plans afoot to deal with the 10 million in another way. I don't know.
And I would say that that is potentially outside of our piece. The governor's recommend has a $10,000 reduction in the purchase and use, 10 million, I'm sorry, in the purchase and use tax. I would say that they probably do expect us to comment on that aspect. Might suggest that we be commenting on that, like we said last year, that the level of funding piece. This does remind me that it did come from, I thought it came from all of us last year, but I know in previous years of my time on the committee, the chairs didn't ask for everybody's input. So, but I'm not like, I definitely want.
With us last year.
I want to have the conversations to a certain degree, and, so that's not my spot, but here's our letter from last year.
So for the record, I'm Damon Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So you started off with a paragraph framing the ongoing fiscal challenges faced by the transportation fund. And you then advocated for discontinuing the JTOC transfer. You followed that up with a request to reallocate the revenues from the purchase and use tax to the transportation fund. And then you advocated for funding necessary to establish the MBUF for battery electric vehicles. And that was the extent of the letter last year. This year, with all of these, it's important to remember that you're reacting for this letter, you're reacting to the governor's proposed budget and also including other things that you think should be in the big bill, not things that should be in the T bill. So that's sort of the distinction here that the committees draw. So if you're asking for additional funding, you're asking for support for creation of a new program. So for example, if you were creating a program in the T bill that was going to use general fund dollars instead of the allocated T fund dollars, that might be something that you request here. Something like that, or if part of the governor's budget was proposal to reallocate some revenues in the state. Similar to the purchase and use tax proposal that's there this year. You could support or oppose that proposal, depending on how you feel about it in terms of the proposal itself and what its effect could be on T fund transportation issues. So obviously the governor's proposal this year appears to be consistent with the proposal this committee made last year to reallocate those revenues back to transportation. So
It's on the agenda for today. It's on the agenda tomorrow. We have agenda time if needed on Friday. So it's not like we're not making decisions on things today. We're going through the same process we went through last year.
I think we should do like, same sort of concept, just outline our $33 million gap. Outline the 1.2% growth in the T fund. Have a bullet point for the 34% that costs to do these projects. Just hammer, sort of hammer that home, and saying, hey, this is our problem, And then me personally might make a comment about the indirect mechanism that was used in the budget to backfill state dollars. We have some concerns, don't have a solution because can't do new revenue, but yeah, just sort of like have a bullet points, just outline our case of why we need that $10 million and then some.
I'm sorry. You're up, Representative McCoy.
With that, I would also, like we have to say something like that, $10 million realizes.
Oh, yeah, no, yes, 100%, yeah.
I mean, I would suggest on the 10 million from purchase and use, maybe saying that, this is year one, but we will continue to recommend that every year we are keeping more of that money in the T fund versus letting it go to education. The pilot surplus, I mean, is that something that is that coming into transportation? No, so it's just out there. Is that something we wanna?
Everybody.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just, that sounds like that might be something if we want to go for that to address it in this letter. Because I think a lot of the other programs we are talking about, we are assuming that we would get funding within the transportation budget and not the general fund. I could be wrong, but that's kind of how I've been.
Yeah, no, and also too, it's, just on top of that is the charging for the EV, 400,000. I mean, that's what we should do in hammer. All, there are other things outside of the T funds that we received that can be
That
clawed
we
back,
wanna, yeah,
you know, and that'd be a good one. I don't know if that 400,000 was accurate because.
well, and she can let us know what year that was paid for.
Well, because
Our business pays sales, or pays a tax on a certain portion of my electric bill. We're a manufacturer. I don't pay I don't pay sales tax on the entire electric bill. I pay a sales tax, I believe, on part of it, but I'll look at that.
Yeah,
Again, anyway, we're not gonna be tax experts, we're not gonna be electricity. But we do have a highlighted issue of that there are other areas that perhaps transportation revenues have been that are not quite allocated to us. That could be something that we discuss.
Anything in manufacturing, in my experience, is exempt. And so if you have a combined operation, you file a certificate that says 20% of this is manufacturing and balances. And it was with fuel with me, but electricity and other places. So that's how I remember that working. And it was subject to audit. And the auditors were very specific about me proving what my customer told me.
Just two more thoughts on that. Number one, it was mentioned Representative McCoy has a bill in energy and digital infrastructure that identifies some money that might be used to to fund EV purchases. And I don't know anything more about it, but I don't know where the money is coming from, but Representative McCoy, did you want to?
No, I mean, that was the omnibus. That's, yeah, the Reggie money.
Okay. My one last question is, when do we need to get the T-bill out of this committee?
March 13th or March 20th, March 20th.
We usually give it to them a couple of days ahead of time because their deadline.
One of the things we're obviously not here.
First week of March.
Reference to the T-bill, I would say that for an FYI of the committee, I've been approached by the Burlington Airport. They've got some language they would like us to consider. Nobody's seen it yet. They just say they're working on it. Damien, that should be coming your way for the Burlington Airport on a piece of regarding their funding, a language change regarding the T-bill. There is the Green Mountain Transit language that Damien's going to present to the committee that they've requested. So there's a couple of, and then there's the Caledonia Airport language request that's not in the T-bill. So for a reminder, it will take in effect, a movement that usually comes from the vice chair, but it doesn't always, but about putting pieces into the bill. We have heard testimony on the Caledonia Airport. We haven't heard testimony on the other two yet, and we will have to do that before that can happen. We're not going to, we can't move to put it in the thing if we haven't done our due diligence. I'm saying those are pieces that are being asked for. There are potentially some others that are going to be asked for. That's separate from this letter. I do want to be, that we're going to continue to work on the T-bill, and those will be in our agenda over the next 3 weeks. That's T-bill language. I'm getting a sidetrack from the letter, but I do want you to be aware of those 3 or 4 other pieces that are looking to be added to, plus I believe there are a couple of others that are being worked on, and we will have to hear more testimony on those. So we're going to get to the part where people kind of ask, well, is this the law or not the law? We're starting ahead in that. We're narrowed down to that spot on pieces that we've gotten a ton of information and background, and it will be much more specific over the next 3 weeks to 4 weeks about are we making a law change or not? And you will see these gentlemen in the committee significantly more, particularly in the back, as we're doing that. So you'll see how the kind of changes for the reminder of we all don't do this on a regular basis. But back to the letter, highlight, we did 3 highlights last year. The smallest one was $3 million. So, and the rest were higher. So it is a appropriations high level. Where do we stand on the budget? What do we want to highlight? And are there any other major pieces? We have asked for purchase and use to be addressed in last year's budget, which didn't happen. It's in this year's budget. We got the bill on the wall in the other committee that is signed on by most of the members or many of the members here in the committee, like what Representative White has mentioned in the support of that sort of stage down. That's not we didn't finalize this for the letter, but that's sort of the direction we've been going as a committee. So those are the kind of where we're at. So I'll try to bring us back to the letter. We're looking at 3 at the most bullet points. We could put some other language about what else we might be considering. And I'm willing to hear, more about those pieces. We pretty well, I would assume everybody's okay with an introductory reminder of the T fund revenue being flat and budget still being under major issues. I'm assuming from sort of nods, everybody's okay with that part of the letter. If we are able to give Damian some thought on what he is going to draft, that we're okay with going in that direction on the first section.
It might be helpful to go through a couple of the things that you're being asked to just comment on. Because unlike last year, there's a couple of language changes proposed in the bill that relate to transportation that they'll also want to know if you're supportive or not supportive of.
You mean the big bill portion?
The big bill.
Oh, okay. Which is on.
And I can walk you through that too.
I also have it up.
Yeah.
You're good. I was just waiting.
Go back to you guys and I can stop talking.
All right, and for that. So within the governor's recommended budget language, so for the big bill. There are a few transportation related language changes that I will just highlight, and then if you have a lot of questions, maybe Damian can dig into them. So the first one is on, I guess, page 4. And this is the language, if you look at the letter, they linked in the letter from HAC to you all, there's a link to the governor's recommended language. It might also be on the committee page now. So under the one-time appropriations, and I apologize, I'll be scrolling a fair bit throughout here. So let me find it. Right here on H, Agency of Transportation in fiscal year 2027, funds are appropriated from the following: 1.3 million and change transportation funds for the FEMA 428 project relocating the central garage to Payne Turnpike in Berlin. You heard about this during the presentation. This is a portion of the money that will be used to build the new central garage location up on Payne Turnpike. Remember this 1.36, it's going to come up again in just a second.
So this is money from the transportation fund going to the buildings, the group that would build this, right?
Yeah, it is money coming from the transportation fund in this section, but in another section, we're going to see where we're getting this money is specifically called out from a different fund.
Okay.
Which is why I want you to remember that
Funds from
1.36.
Transportation's going out to whoever builds the building.
Correct, yeah, whoever won the bid, I suppose, yep. Then, let me find the next section. Apologize while I scroll to page 7. So within D101 fund transfers, if you look at section 2 there, these are the sort of annual transfers that you do in the transportation fund. There's one for the general obligation bond debt services, 294,000. That's also on your budget on a page sheet. These are sort of transfers that we do every year. And then the downtown transportation and related capital improvements fund is also one that we do annually and have done annually for a number of years. This is sort of standard business. You then go to page 8. Section 7, you'll see from the insurance reserve fund to the transportation fund, that's where we're getting that 1.36 and change. So that's where the money that's coming from the T fund to pay for the central garage is coming from this insurance reserve fund.
And what is that insurance reserve fund?
Great question. I don't know the specifics. I'm guessing it's related to insurance payments for when the building itself flooded.
Okay.
We probably got insurance from, but I'm not sure on the exact specifics of that fund.
Makes sense, but yeah,
Related to that, I would imagine.
that seems pretty straightforward.
We do have on the distant agenda items, I'm not exactly sure where it's at in the spot, but an update on the entire central garage planning, construction, and sort of where it's at and where it'll be at when we get towards getting ready to leave. Yes.
Can you tell us, like we built one up in Swanton or in,
District Garage.
yeah, District Garage? Where do those funds typically come from? They don't come from the T fund. Do they?
For the district garages, a lot of them come from the T fund.
Building them, okay. So here's a case where, well, it's insurance, so it seems to make sense.
And this is a portion of the funds going to build the garage. The other portion is coming from FEMA funding that we've gotten. So federal FEMA fund, they're doing a excess receipts request for the additional money coming from this FEMA IDT fund to pay for the vast majority of it's coming from FEMA.
So at this point in our budget this year, there isn't any T funds necessarily going directly to it. It's sort of money coming in and out.
So yeah, I would say that this insurance reserve fund is becoming T fund and then T fund is going to, but yes, to your point, I think the answer is yes. Yeah.
And I also just feel compelled to say the building's not 1.3 million.
Right.
About 20, well, but more than 10 times that. So, but that's the portion that's coming through that piece today, but I am guessing, I don't remember exactly, but the building itself and the whole project and all it's standing is probably 22 or 24 million. And the district garage, I think, was 9 or.
Yeah, is there any indication where the rest of the money is gonna come from?
That's the FEMA funding.
Okay.
We'll make up the majority of the rest.
That'll pretty much do it. Okay.
My understanding is that except for this 1.3 here, the rest is coming from FEMA money. Yeah.
And I have also heard you get that in the presentation piece of 2 million out of the 24 million settlement is to go to put the land that's is going to then be vacant to be, I don't know if the term remediated is correct, or to make it say floodplain
right
use of some sort. I'm not familiar exactly with the terminology. There is a couple million being spent on the site that will be vacated from entirely.
Okay.
That's not feedback.
We're gonna jump then. Page 30. So this in section E 516 related to the education fund, but this is the purchase and use step down. That's where this is occurring. So you'll see here the language. This is sort of changing or amending the transportation fund statute or the education fund statute, sorry. And essentially it's decreasing the amount of purchase and use revenue that goes to the education fund by $10 million a year until FY 29. And then in FY 30, if you scroll down to the next section, E 516.1, you'll see that the transfer in its entirety is repealed. So no money will be going to the education fund. All purchase and use will be going to the transportation fund. That's these two, E 516 and 516.1 is where that will be occurring. Then the last two things, I believe, page 33, scroll real quick. There it is. Page is the same. 35. Okay. Page 35, section E 923. This section, and this section language will change slightly, but the sort of what is occurring will remain the same. It'll be pushed out 1 year, but this would establish that all the interest earned within the transportation fund stays within the transportation fund. As the governor's recommended language had it sort of going into place when the bill passed, but after some discussion with finance and management and some other people has decided that this will be pushed out essentially to take effect in FY 28. So it doesn't impact the FY 27 budget because there is sort of monetary shift that would happen here. But essentially starting in FY 28, all of the interest that is earned from what is sort of left in the bottom line of the T fund at the year end would stay within the T fund and could be spent on transportation things.
That's not the case today.
That is not, I believe it goes to the general fund today.
Is any idea how much money we're talking about?
It changes depending on how much is there at year end. I believe for FY25, I heard the number around $1 million. But it sort of fluctuates depending on how much money is there when they sort of close the books at the end of the year.
Does anyone have any idea whether education fund money has to go into general fund similar to this? No.
I do not know. I'll defer to Chris Root if he knows.
On Fred, huh?
Sure, Pursuant joint fiscal, the ed fund retains its interest. And this looks very different from all the different funds because their cash flows are so different, so. Might think $1 million might seem really low for a fund the size of the T fund, but when you really think about. How the T fund operates, it doesn't have like a very high average balance most of the time. The revenues come in every month, the revenues go out, so. We've also been in a very high interest rate environment and a high cash balance environment in recent years. So I fully expect, it's, Logan was correct, the number we received was 1.06 million. I expect that will be creeping downward in future years, just like we expect it to be creeping downward with the general.
We're gonna make the fund change in time for us to enjoy the slow parts.
And to make this
You must
even
want my
more,
own checkbook.
to make this even more uplifting, what Logan had mentioned, we had a conversation with finance and management, the treasurer's office, a lot of us at JFOs, very expensive, 15 minutes. And we all sort of came to the realization that if you all agree that this makes sense, it would be cleaner to make it effective for fiscal 28 rather than the current year. Because if you make it effective, or rather in 27, because if you make it effective in 27, it unbalances things with the general fund. And if you make it effective next year, we'll have the new revenue forecast that reflects this change. When the GovRec does their budget build, it'll be factored in, and you don't have to go in there with a hatchet trying to make things balance out.
Thank you.
Not a question, but if we're talking about this, but.
We'll see where he goes and then.
One more section.
we'll have to-
So E923.1, this amends 19 VSA 11A, which is sort of the mentions the transportation fund appropriations. This is related to that EV infrastructure fee that is charged. Now, you all know that it goes to ACCD. First, it has to essentially go to VTrans, who then sort of sends it. This would allow them just to make an appropriation of T fund dollars right to the Department of Housing and Community Development for the purpose as laid out when we established the fee in the first place. So this is technical, but also a policy change because the agency will no longer be sort of involved in the transferring of that money and the program itself. It won't have to go through their hands first. And it would require sort of changing this bit of statute to allow, because you can see there, we sort of have a couple carve outs for what transportation funds can be appropriated for. This would add an additional appropriate or allowable appropriation for that very specific purpose as stated there.
So is this just sort of cleaning it up? Because, I mean, the infrastructure fee, if things go as expected or as I thought to expect, they'll last maybe another 2 years before the MBUF sort of kicks in. And we discussed when the MBUF kicks in, that literally disappears. So is this just, does it seem worth it to clean it up? That, we only go another year or so? Or?
It's a question for you all. I know last year the administration proposed making a special fund for these monies. I don't want to speak for the agency or for the administration. they've tried for a couple of years to make it so it doesn't go through V-Trans first. They can sort of speak to why they don't like doing that. We set it up in this place with the sort of expectation that it was only going to be around for a few years and then it would sort of go away. So why create a special fund was the sort of decision you all came out to last year. It's really a policy question for you all to answer if you want to do this for this year or keep it how things are.
It doesn't change anything in the money that it's still,
So
it's just a different,
it changes where essentially how these funds get appropriated. So under this proposal, and you can see in ACCD's budget for FY27, they're getting a $1 million T fund appropriation, assuming that this goes through for that fund. Previously, or if we didn't do what this statute said, we would need to appropriate one-time $1 million to V-Trans and tell them to send it to ACCD. So it's a change of how you want to accomplish this, but there is a little bit of
Did they get a 10% pilot fund too, kickback?
probably so. So, and I'm sure someone from the agency, I don't know if this came from Candace or the agency, or if it was higher up, could tell you why they want to do it this way over the way it's currently going.
I'm curious too, on that same topic, on these transfers of the infrastructure fee. You know, we've selected $1 million, so it's been estimated. Is there ever a true up? Because I'm guessing it doesn't go exactly $1 million. So it comes into DMV. You know, is there ever a true up to make sure that they get the exact amount, or does this take that away? Even though in statute, I think it says the infrastructure fee goes to
Right.
ACCD.
Yeah, I think, and I have to go back and look at how the lawyers wrote the bill, but I believe all the revenue that is collected from this fee is supposed to go into that. I don't know if we gave them sort of the ability to estimate what the revenue would be and appropriate that every year, or if it has to be the exact amount. I'd want to go back and look at that and
I'd be curious, just
with Damien.
because I think there's been some questions. Is like, is this the right amount that they're getting? Is it the amount that we've collected?
Yeah, we can definitely look into that.
All right, to be fair to everybody that's got to go to the floor, we are, tomorrow morning, we got the caucus and the election and piece. It will be, tomorrow afternoon will be part of the regional planning commission and follow up from all of that.
Discussion on that? Yeah.
And any action items that come from that and this. So this is what we have tomorrow afternoon, as much as when Damien and Logan are available, and we'll adjust. So regardless of which way it appears on your agenda, so the things we're working on tomorrow afternoon. So we are adjourned until we see you tomorrow on the